Hello, welcome back once again to Urban X-Files, where today we're going to be talking about someone I know who's been kind enough to share their paranormal experiences with me. So this is very kindly done so by Caryn, who is also known as White Witch, and she's written quite a decent amount of her personal experiences. And her quote is, "The paranormal is not an obsession. It is a passion." I don't really remember when I came back aware of spirits, otherwise known as ghosts. I recall being frightened by stories when at the cottage, the man with the golden arm, and such. I can't say when the first encounter was, but for argument's purposes, let's say the age of 13, 12, to be on the safe side. It was shortly after the death of her mother's father. Caryn cannot remember who, but I was called downstairs. You see, we lived with her parents. I was leaving the living room and proceeded along the short hallway to the top of the stairs to answer. There, halfway along the hall, was my grandmother's face. Only his face. It came towards me, then disappeared. I'm not sure of the time frame though. A couple of years later, it came to me in a dream. He had shown me a book layout on the basement table. It was open to a page I could not see that was typed on the page. The following day I went down to the basement expecting to see nothing, but there on the table lay the book open. Thinking back, I did not read the pages thoroughly. I was so unnerved I couldn't believe, and I kept this to myself. Although, in finding this book, I found his business cards. I wish I had taken the time to read the pages to understand what he had wanted. I've only seen him a couple of times since. My father's father has only appeared once that I can recall. He was a mist that moved across the winter scene that hung in our living room. My memories of Grandpa are a man who would play find out which hand one of these is in this one, no, and so forth. If I guessed right or wrong, there was always a quarter for me. He was the centre of the family when visiting. I remember being told he walked every day until hospitalised at 95. Unfortunately, I do not recall his thick Scottish accent as I should have, though being the baby of the family, memories are not as sharp due to my age at this time. Strange now thinking my father's stepmother has never visited. The strongest memory of Gran was before she passed. She passed then as brought back, upon which my parents were told, "If I go again, please don't bring me back." It is so beautiful here. In this part of the context there's taken where I think she passed away and she had transitioned into the afterlife, but was brought back by the doctors, and the tales of the afterlife and the transition for people who've never met, never had any contact, never shared anything, yet they all seem to have something very similar in their individual experiences. Excuse me. And then the next time she passed, her wish was granted to be left in peace. Seeing her in the coffin, I remember how peaceful she looked. Gran was the only grandparent I seen in a coffin. My mother's mother and I were close due to the fact we lived with them and being the youngest. It was not until after my grandmother's death that my mother and I became close. I did not see my grandmother after she was taken from the house by ambulance after having a stroke. I was alone at home with her when this took place, and I was unaware of what was happening. Reflecting, I should have stayed with her through being afraid of not understanding what was going on. One regret I have is not being there for her. Now, if you do watch this, Caryn, I just want you to feel assured that this was in no way something you could have done or changed or anything like that. You were only very young and fear is real. So please don't hold on to that thought. You know, it happened as it happened, and you were there with her anyway. I'm made her very proud, I'm sure. So please don't take that to weigh heavy on your heart. Making a call to my parents. They returned home from visiting friends that evening. I vividly remember as if it were yesterday. I told my parents to never leave me alone with her again. Even now, those words become a stabbing pain in my heart, being so selfish, scared. Needless to add, as I have stated beforehand, she never returned back home, at least physically. Mum told me that in the hospital Grandma was mentioning me and Arch and our cat. In the days following her death, it was not unusual to hear her calling for me. I would reach the top of the stairs and sadly remember she was gone. The voice was so real. I occupied the back bedroom with the staircase to my grandparents' kitchen and would awake to my grandmother on the stairs. I would hear the familiar sound of a crutch followed by the sound of a footstep. Having had knee surgery at one time, I heard this sound a few times in the years after her death. The first dream in which she came to me, my grandmother explained she could not come back. I pleaded with her to do so. Once again, my grandma repeated she could not. At this point, she was in a wheelchair moving away from me. She told me that there was someone I should be close to. Then I grabbed and turned the chair to stop her from going. A friend of mine at the time was now sitting in the chair. In the next dream, Grandma brought me to a large room filled with clothes. Some I knew from my childhood, like the satin PJs and a few other items. Next, we passed a black velvet jacket, and beside it on the wall was a skirt. 2 years later, a boy I was dating brought me that suit without knowledge of the dream. There was also a wedding dress displayed on the wall, which I later purchased for her first marriage. The third dream, I was in an elevator with Grandma and my sister. Grandma said someone is pregnant, and it was her coming back. She and my sister looked at me, then Grandma and I looked at my sister. A surprised look came across her face. 3 months later, my sister informed the family she was pregnant. When I repeated my dream to her, she became slightly uncomfortable and half-heartedly dismissed it, though Mother did request I leave out the part about her coming back as the baby. I believe I did tell her years later though. I will always remember my niece walking into the living room as a toddler, smiling. Grandma kept pictures in the bay window. The look upon my niece's face was as if she's happy to see nothing much had changed. The house was left to my mother due to her assistance with her parents throughout the years. I was given my grandparents' bedroom set when I took over the upstairs living room as my bedroom. One evening, I lay in bed after just turning the lights out trying to go to sleep. I looked off into a corner of my room and noticed a mist forming. I jumped from the bed and turned the lights back on. I thought it would be my grandmother, and I regretted doing so quickly. I chastised myself for not allowing to form and fully speak to me. I am not sure of the timing of this incident, but I will say it as well. I cannot recall if I was home alone or not when the phone rang. Either way, I picked up the receiver. I said hello, and a static on the line. For only a moment a voice came through saying, "Hello, it's me." Instantly, I knew it was the voice of my grandmother, though once again, afraid, I hung up. Her favourite song was "You Light Up My Life," sung by Debbie Boone. There were numerous times I heard it playing when my thoughts were on situations in my younger life. As I grew older, its visits to my dreams were less frequent, till not at all. My first room had a door that separated it from the upstairs kitchen. One morning in the summer, I awoke to my bedroom door violently shaking back and forth in a small to medium radius. I was terrified. I got the nerve, jumped out of bed and grabbed the door to stop it. From that day on, I made sure the old iron made of iron was in front of it. From that time on, I have always had an issue with doors. They can make me feel uneasy. Now, moving ahead to when my room was at the front of the house, another incident took place. We had men over visiting, placing siding on the house one summer. It was late morning, I believe, when the top shelf of my wall fell. Not just fell, went up in the air, then fell, avoiding my stereo cabinet below. I had a part of my house collection on it though. Luckily, it had minimal damage. I chalked this up to another time in the house, which would cause me unease. It was something else I was afraid of. It would repeat itself, although it never did, thank goodness. One evening I was in my living room when I turned to see a figure in the dining room doorway. The figure was tall and dressed in a black cloak. In its hand was a sickle. Yes, I believe it was death standing in the doorway. They say animals see spirits, and I believe so. When my mother's father passed away, my cat, Sammy, sat in my grandparents' bedroom crying. Then when Sammy had passed 3 months later, I adopted a cat from the Toronto Humane Society. Sammy's favourite place to sleep was my parents' bed. Smokey, my second cat, would not go inside the room. He would only look in from the hallway. Going into my mid-teen years, this next experience is unnerving to remember. This took place in my sister's basement. Stay tuned. Next video, part 2, will be coming very soon. Thank you for watching, stay safe, and see you all in the next video.